The A to Z of Globalist Society. In this piece, we're going on an alphabetic journey across globalist society. Consider it your unauthorised guide to globalism and its discontents. If you're a globalist or are fond of them, now is the time to switch this off. Otherwise, let's begin. Oh, and if you've not yet watched or listened to the A to Z of Woke Society, be sure to check that out too. A. Anti-Semitism. Prominent Jewish organisations like the ADL and the AJC deem the term globalist to be anti-Semitic. It's on their websites, just search for globalist. Imagine if black organisations like BLM and the NAACP proclaimed that the word criminal was racist toward black people. What possible reason would they have to do this? Would it be to cover up black people's disproportionate contribution to crime? Would it be to try to dismiss the concept of criminal so that we can't criticise criminals and thus cannot implicate black people who are overrepresented as criminals? Would it be to render us helpless or ineffective in our fight against crime, hence sparing black criminals? All these theories seem plausible in such a scenario. Now, substitute the word black with Jewish, criminals with globalists, and crime with globalism. How does that sound now? It's important to state here that I'm not someone, A, who believes in a global, coordinated, explicitly Jewish conspiracy to destroy the West, or B, who harbours animosity towards Jewish people as an ethnicity. I'm mostly neutral towards them and Israel. Having said that, I'm not blind, and the fact is that secular Jewish people are overrepresented as owners, controllers, and leaders in media, entertainment, finance, big tech, the US government, and academia. Domains which serve as the tentacles of globalists. Usually, where there's smoke, there's fire. And while some may insist this Jewish globalist overlap is mere correlation, and others argue it is causation, what comedian Dave Chappelle said rings true. If they're black, then it's a gang. If they're Italian, it's a mob. If they're Jewish, it's a coincidence, and you should never speak about it. B. Brexit. A referendum held in 2016 on the question of whether the UK should leave the European Union or remain within it. The Leave side won. The establishment realised they'd screwed up and tried to prevent it from happening. And after 3.5 years of their scheming and sabotage, and against all odds, the UK finally left the EU. It was free, or maybe not. For the plot twist was that it's made no difference whatsoever, because the globalists and their frenemies, the woke, still control the UK. If there was any positive that came out of Brexit then, it's that the hidden hand of power was revealed. We now know the enemy must be completely banished from society if we're to reclaim our future. C. Capitalism. An economic system in which the means for producing goods and services, i.e. through the use of land, labour and capital, are privately owned and controlled. This system has helped raise a standard of living for many, fueled technological innovation, and made the nations who embraced it wealthier and more powerful than those that did not. Unfortunately, whilst capitalism has done much good, it is also inherently unsustainable and parasitic in the long run. This is because the self-interested, amoral, and expansionary pursuit of profit that is its singular holy mission ends up ruining people and their nations for a buck. It transforms people into sick, weak, spoiled, mindless, narcissistic, and addicted consumers, and nations into cultural shells and economic zones whose sole function is to be the economic playground of capitalists, who have taken their final form as today's globalists. Check out the profit men who control the West for more on this. Cartel. This is a group of producers of goods and services who collude to increase their profits and dominate their market. Today, we could consider the globalists a modified form of cartel, who collude to increase their profits and power and to dominate the world. Censorship. The globalist-owned media and tech platforms are restricting hate speech and misinformation because no one should be exposed to such heinous things. What are hate speech and misinformation? They're the new names for what used to be called facts and truth. China. On the one hand, an outsourced slave labour camp. On the other hand, a geopolitical foe. The globalists are trying to detach themselves from China as labour costs are rising there, and because they realise they can't control their government. There's also an ironic cultural gulf between them, for in an age where the Western globalists have embraced the cultural far left, i.e. wokeism, China is embracing what globalists would call the cultural far right, i.e. nationalism and traditionalism. What seems inevitable is that China will emerge as the leader of one of two or three poles in an emerging multipolar world, because the globalists have zero chance of bringing China into their orbit. Civil service. A permanent and ever-expanding class of faceless rulers whom we have little control or visibility over. This invisible bureaucratic army includes government institutions, agencies and departments that all serve a globalist and woke agenda. One prerequisite for turning things around in our society, that is, if it doesn't collapse first, will be to completely gut the civil service out. If Twitter still works after firing 75% of its employees, the bloated, uncivil service will work too, and far better. Climate change. Globalists have latched on to this secular doomsday cult, more in word than deed, in order to profit from it. They need to be careful not to shoot themselves in the foot, though, by handing too much power to their partners in crime, the woke. They may come to regret it. Communism is a socio-economic system in which the means for producing goods and services are owned by everyone and no one. In other words, the complete opposite of capitalism. In a communist society, in theory at least, private ownership and the profit incentive are abolished, as are social classes and the state. In practice, however, communism drags everyone into poverty and struggle, and creates a malevolent and all-powerful ruling class. The communist theoretical paradise, then, turns out to be a real-world hell. Why is this relevant today? Well, strange as it seems, globalism, despite having its origins in capitalism and working day and night to turn us into homo consumers and our nations into generic, hollowed-out economic zones, could in practice be leading us to a different destination, one that looks a lot like real-world communism. Whether globalists realise this or not is another matter. More specifically, it could be a dual system of private ownership for a small ruling class and no ownership for everyone else. Or put another way, a capitalist communist Frankenstein. Maybe that's what globalism really is. Conservative Party. A corrupt and incompetent political party in the UK that serves a globalist agenda. They are currently in power, but will likely be crushed at the next election by the now reformed Labour Party, who are also globalist, corrupt and incompetent, but with the added bonus of being ultra-woke. The outlook for post-Brexit Britain looks glorious indeed. Consumerism. The ultimate goal of modern life is to consume, to be compulsive little consumption machines, to complete our evolution from Homo sapiens to Homo consumers. Consumption, after all, means profit, and globalists will pursue that to the ends of the earth, regardless of the cost to society or humanity. Corporations provide useful products and services like soap, fridges, cars, insurance, and more. Also provide terrible products and services like antidepressants, processed foods, degenerate music, gender transitions, and more. Basically, When you have an amoral profit incentive as your North Star, anything and everything is on the table, so long as you can make money from it. You're only limited by the morals of your time, at least those that the government is willing to enforce through law. And when it comes to our morals, they are currently in steep decline. I guess that means more market opportunities will be opening up. What do you think of Soulbay? It's an idea I have for an online marketplace where you can sell your soul, or lease it out and collect rental payments on it. Critical infrastructure. What has been sold off to mostly private, but also state-owned, foreign corporations and investment funds. Many countries do it. For example, their water, energy, telecommunications infrastructure, etc. are owned and run by some random multinational or fund. Here you see the globalist class at work. It doesn't matter if a water utility in country A is owned by an investment fund in country B, and if an electricity grid in country C is owned by a corporation in country A. All that matters is that the globalists own or control it. They have zero loyalty to their individual nations. They are transnational profit seekers, a class unto themselves. A French globalist, for example, has far more in common with an Australian globalist than they have with their own countrymen. Cryptocurrency. A good hedge should our present monetary system falter or fail, which it inevitably will. Holding Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, and some other coins isn't a bad idea in such a scenario. Whether decentralized cryptocurrencies can be a viable alternative to our current system is another matter. Many of these cryptocurrencies are in practice centralized. This includes Bitcoin and Ethereum, despite what their marketing suggests. So even if they could replace it, it would take a big effort to move the needle back towards decentralization. And they'd be sacrificing either security or scalability to do so. Centralization seems unavoidable then. So it's more a question of if you want the government and banks, aka globalists, to control money, or some other entity or group of people to. Apart from that, the crypto world today is filled with A. Scammers, thieves and hype men. B. Venture capital firms, crypto exchanges, stablecoin issuers, and crypto multimillionaires and billionaires, all who control and manipulate the market. And C. Average Joes looking to get rich quick. The words casino, Wild West, hype, and greed aptly describe the scene. This isn't to say you can't make money in crypto, nor that something useful won't come out of it in the mid to long term, including helping preserve your wealth in the event of a collapse, or providing an alternative to governments and banks' monopoly on money creation. But time will tell. D. Democrat Party. The quintessential globalist party. The party of choice for Wall Street, corporations, big tech, the mainstream media, Hollywood, academia, and more. Also, apparently fighting for the little guy. Whilst I'm not a fan of internet acronyms, I'll make a one-off exception here. LOL. Diversity. Something wholly embraced and promoted by globalists. Why wouldn't it be? Since they're not loyal to any nation, people, or culture, what does it matter to them if our societies mix lots of very different and incompatible peoples together? For them, diversity means more workers and consumers to directly or indirectly generate more profits for them. All they're seeing are pound, dollar, or euro signs above our white, brown, black, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, and atheist heads. But what is diversity really? It's a rosy word used to disguise the truth, which is that it's a system of mass immigration, or better yet, mass colonization. Globalists are enthusiastically and callously selling out our nations and civilization for their 30 pieces of silver. Never forget that. E. Experts. Highly educated fools who are paid or incentivized to put forth opinions that favor the interests of globalists and their woke allies. If there's one thing you can trust about so-called experts, it's that their self-interest comes first and truth comes last. F. Foundations. Entities that forward a political or ideological agenda. They're an effective way for the ultra-rich and powerful, or their heirs, to exert their influence in our world, using the cover of philanthropy. Free markets. A myth, something that exists only in theory, just like the theory of a communist paradise. I guess all sides have their delusions. G. Globalization. There is broadly three types of globalization: economic, political, and cultural. Here's an example of each. Economic is opening your country's doors to takeover by corporations, banks, and investment firms and funds, aka the vehicles through which globalists generate their wealth. Political is embracing liberal democracy and international treaties, conventions, and laws, which together form the best system for empowering globalists. Cultural is accepting woke ideology and values, which are adept at destroying any movement or opposition that could threaten the globalist agenda. That's globalization. Gold. Like crypto, another hedge for if our monetary or financial system should falter or fail. It has a proven track record over thousands of years, and short of us mining gold-filled asteroids, and they are out there, it will continue to be a relatively safe haven for wealth preservation. Great Reset. Remember what I said about the capitalist communist Frankenstein? Yeah, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. H. Hollywood. Cultural globalists spreading their values, beliefs, and agenda around the world. For profit, of course. They like to think of themselves as the good guys, as being distinct from their fellow globalists in finance or business. But it's the same men in suits who own and run this industry too. I. Investment banks. The globalist financial elite. They make sure capital flows to new and existing globalist enterprises, and they make a fortune doing so. There is a revolving door between investment banks and the central banks and treasury departments of many nations, with America being the most prominent example. Investment bankers are often painted as being immoral, but truth be told, they work hard and dutifully worship at the altar of their holy trinity, which is money, money, and money. Investment management firms are the biggest owners of large, publicly listed companies. The biggest firm in the world is BlackRock, who has been a key driver of ESG, which is short for environmental, social, and corporate governance investing, or in layman's terms, woke investing. They have used their position to put pressure on companies to comply with the woke agenda, not necessarily because they believe in it, but because it's been profitable to do so up till now. We'll see if that changes in the future. Ivy League universities. Factories that churn out globalists, or woke zombies, or both. J. Jeffrey Epstein. A billionaire sexual predator and trafficker who targeted underage teen girls. He had many wealthy and influential globalists in his network, and likely could have incriminated some of them. However, he conveniently died in his prison cell whilst awaiting trial. K. Klaus Schwab. Founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. Klaus sits in the category of self-anointed good guys who don't realize they're actually bad guys. You can include people like Bill Gates and George Soros in this category too. These three, and others like them, see themselves as geniuses who are uniquely positioned to remold the world according to their enlightened vision for it. Politically, Schwab is centre-left, Gates is centrist, and Soros is far left. And what their visions really amount to, when you look past their rosy or technocratic language, is greater control of people and society, in the case of Schwab and Gates, and the eradication of borders, culture, and meritocracy, in the case of Soros. So these are our ordained fates, to be controlled and/or destroyed. Thanks, guys. L. Libertarians. Useful idiots for globalists. Full disclosure, I used to be one of these useful idiots. I stopped being one when I finally accepted that to be a true libertarian, you have to ignore or misconstrue human nature and culture. In other words, ignore reality and embrace a world of theory and fantasy, just like the utopian communist does. What's interesting is, I'm far from unique in having made this journey from libertarian to where I stand now. Over the past decade, many others have made the same journey too. Lobbyists. Professional best friends and like minds of politicians and government bureaucrats. Also unofficial policy writers and lawmakers. There's a pecking order in our society, and lobbyist interests rank higher than the public interest. So just deal with it. M. Mainstream media. Mainly corporate-owned or funded. Others, like the BBC, NPR, and Australian ABC, are fully or partially funded by the taxpayer. Some outlets are globalist, some are woke, many are both. The mainstream media is largely a truth and fact-free zone. They produce destructive ideological propaganda for the brainwashed masses. The people who run the media and create the content are some of the most abominable beings on earth. The harm this institution and its minions have done and are doing to society is monumental. Thankfully, we know who all of them are. So when the shoe is on the other foot, they will discover that evil actions have consequences. N. Nationalism. Say what you will about nationalism, but the globalists hate it. They try to undermine or destroy any leader or movement that arises under its banner, whether within the West or outside it. Globalists see nations, culture, and borders as outdated and as obstacles to their unhindered, expansive, global pursuit of profit. Luckily for them, globalist political leaders are in power in almost every Western country today. Now that's a win. New York Times. This is the high priest of the mainstream media, the ultimate globalist and woke publication. It is the standard bearer for lies and propaganda masquerading as respectable and intelligent commentary. The day this publication is shut down will be a great day for America and the Western world. O. Outsourcing. Globalists love to outsource. It's the cheap, easy, and profitable option. You can outsource the production of anything: washing machines, plastic spoons, and even humans. Today, for example, our globalist societies gleefully outsource to foreign peoples and cultures the production of our future generations, who will supposedly carry our civilization forward. So, your t-shirt is made in China, your car in Korea, and your next generation in sub-Saharan Africa, the Muslim world, and Mexico. Oligarchy. We're ruled over by a corrupt and malicious minority who are far more committed to serving a globalist and woke agenda than to doing what's right and best for their peoples and nations. The bad news is things will likely get a lot worse for us under this transnational oligarchy. The good news is that their ideology and aims are so unnatural that their destruction and replacement is inevitable. P. Peaked. We have well and truly peaked under our current system. The peak was in the 20th century. One could argue it was the 1990s. Others might say the 1950s. Either way, under this system, our best days are behind us. What system am I referring to? Liberalism. Liberalism is the grandfather of globalism. It sits at the head of a family tree. Its children were capitalism, individualism, atheism/secularism, and liberal democracy. These in turn begat their own children, namely prosperity, consumerism, and globalism. Prosperity and consumerism gave birth to decadence, and decadence had a child with communism, a competing system from outside the liberalism family tree. And their child was wokeism. So liberalism has evolved to become consumerism, globalism, and wokeism, all of which are destructive and parasitic forces. There is thus nowhere left for liberalism's bloodline to go. Its final step will be to destroy itself and its host. Hence why I say we have peaked. From here, we will get poorer, sicker, weaker, and more depressed, divided, confused, and lost. The ruling minority will also become more corrupt, self-serving, incompetent, and tyrannical, and will hide it less and less. So, trying to go back to the 1990s or 1950s or 1800s or whatever just isn't feasible. It's over. We're living through the end of the 400-year-old liberal era and the end of the 600-year run of the modern West. Nothing lasts forever, and this is just the latest in a series of civilizational deaths and rebirths. The classical West died and was replaced by the medieval West, which in turn died and was replaced by the modern West. And now we must shift our focus and energy to what will replace the dying modern West, West 4.0. QAnon is a movement of people, primarily in the US, who believe that there is a secret cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles in the highest levels of government, business, and the media, and that there is a mysterious insider who knows all the secrets of this cabal and prophesizes that Donald Trump is the savior who will defeat them. There's a lot more to it, and it sounds almost like a religious cult, but rather than go into all the details, the point I want to make here is reality offers enough to indict the present ruling minority without resorting to speculation, fantasy, or absurdity. Taking that path is counterproductive. You lose credibility and authority. Plus, the people you'll eventually need to get on side won't take you seriously. You'll just be seen as a low IQ buffoon. Having said all that, I've no doubt QAnon supporters mean well, and their hearts are in the right place. I just think engaging in a race to the bottom is a stupid strategy. R. Reptilians. Echoing QAnon, some people on the far fringes claim the globalist elite are reptilians. That is, actual physical reptilian humanoids who masquerade as humans. This is, of course, a fantasy. However, I think it is apt as a metaphor, because whilst they may look like you and me, their values, beliefs, and loyalties are completely different. Indeed, our interests are so misaligned that they may as well be a different species. S. Social media has been a key tool for accelerating cultural globalization. It's figuratively shrunk our planet and enabled us to connect with people all around the world. Ironically, this hasn't increased the division between civilizations, but rather within them, particularly in the West. Or maybe it hasn't increased it, but merely exposed it. Whatever it is, what we know for certain is that all major social media platforms, excluding Twitter under Elon Musk, censor or shadow ban one side exclusively, the side who oppose the globalist and woke agenda. So it's clear which side of the fence they're on. Hopefully, Rumble joins Twitter in becoming a prominent alternative to the big tech platforms. So far, the signs are positive. T. Think tanks. I can't think of a more useless group of people, useless to society that is, than the intellectuals who occupy think tanks. The majority of think tanks are globalist, liberal, or woke, or a mix of these. Others are libertarian, which again means globalist and liberal. And some are on the centre-right, so globalist and liberal. They all produce hot air, they all have an agenda, they're usually funded by special interest groups or wealthy benefactors, and whatever they spend all day thinking about, researching and proposing to government bureaucrats is worse than pointless. It's detrimental to us all. The results speak for themselves. If there's one thing West 4.0 can do without, it's think tanks and the intellectuals who occupy them. USA. If the globalists had global capitals, They would be California, the cultural capital, New York, the economic capital, and Washington, D.C., the political capital. Oh, these global capitals are all in the same country. Well, that's because the US is the biggest incubator, exporter, and enforcer of a globalist world order. This isn't an indictment against ordinary, decent Americans, but rather against the parasitic, malicious, and self-serving ruling minority who have taken America hostage. Nothing less than their absolute and permanent defeat is acceptable, not just for the sake of America, but for every Western nation, because we are all living in client states of this globalist and woke empire. We are all held hostage by her abominations. V. Vampires. In the A to Z of woke society, I called the woke zombies. I guess it's only fitting the globalists get a label too. How about vampires, sucking the life out of us and our societies? W. Wokeism. Speaking of zombies, the woke are the tag team partners of the globalists. It's great to see zombies and vampires working together to defeat their common foe, mankind. Now, here's a question. Which one is worse? The globalists worship profit above all else. That's all they care about. They're selfish, amoral creatures. Whereas the woke are moral creatures. It's just their morality and beliefs are utterly depraved and evil. So, who's worse? Is it the amoral vampire who causes evil but doesn't care less about it? Or the moral zombie who willfully commits and spreads evil? X. Xenogenesis. Means the production of offspring completely unlike its parents. Consider America, the seed of globalism. Its parents were the Founding Fathers, the Declaration of Independence, and the US Constitution. Now look at the America of today. Look at its bloated government, its corrupt institutions, its decadent culture, its slimy ruling class. What the hell happened? On the surface, it looks like xenogenesis. But when we consider the liberalism family tree, the path to the present isn't that mysterious. In hindsight, it was perhaps inevitable that America, a nation founded on the principles of liberalism, would end up where it is today. Of course, we get 0 points for noticing this hundreds of years after the fact, and it's a cheap shot to criticize America and liberalism in hindsight. After all, the wisest man relying on foresight will often be trumped by the stupidest man relying on hindsight. So, if it wasn't a wrong turn, but an inevitable one, should America regret the path it took? No. Under liberalism, we got the internet, we got space shuttles, we got cars, electricity, modern medicine, and much more. We've also learnt some valuable lessons about what works and what doesn't, in the cultural, economic, political, and other spheres. There is, in short, much to be thankful for. But there is no going back. America and the West have reached the final branch in the liberalism family tree, and the 600-year journey of the modern West is coming to an end. The globalists and their allies, the woke, are simply the wrecking ball. Why? You. Ultimately, it's people that are destroying our society, and it's people who are going to reimagine and rebuild it. People means you. Now, you can choose to stay on the sidelines, as the majority will do, or you can jump into the arena and make an impact. As time goes on, vehicles and avenues will arise that enable you to play your part. You just need to be ready. Z. Zeros. What globalists want to keep adding to their revenues, profits, and bank balances. I want to state here that I don't begrudge anyone making money, even lots of it, and reaping the benefits that come from that. If you're providing a valuable product or service, then I'm happy for you to be handsomely compensated for it. What I begrudge is when these people and their organizations use their wealth, power, and influence to subvert society. Rather than being happy with their success and being good citizens, they instead choose to screw their society over and to bend the laws and rules to their advantage and to everyone else's detriment. There is nothing sacred in their eyes. They want more, and they want it now. And if that means turning us into sick, weak, addicted automatons, so be it. If that means dismantling culture, erasing borders, and sabotaging nations, so be it. If that means partnering with explicitly evil movements like wokeism, so be it. Being wealthy and successful doesn't mean you need to go down this path, but for some, it just proves irresistible. Like Gollum in Lord of the Rings, they become obsessed with the ring. They become slaves to it, unable or unwilling to tell right from wrong, good from evil. Well, the globalists have chosen their path, we have chosen ours. Thankfully, their day of reckoning is coming. And that's the A to Z of globalist society. Now, who's got their wooden stake ready?